All right. Now you can see it, right? It's there in front of you.
Yes, all good,
This,
all good.
okay. So this illustration that I was mentioning right here, this is the chart, and we've got a red line that you could see. It's going across horizontally from left to right. This red line is what is separating the visible web on top. We will be talking about, or you could say that I was only describing what is visible web so far. And visible web has things like news articles, etc., anything that you can get your you access without having to register, or for without worrying about subscription or nothing of that sort. So all that is written here on top above the red line. Anything that is given a shade or has a background shade is slightly different from the one that is either different shade of color or is white is on top. Starting with the top, it is open to general public. So you can upload, you have the ability to upload something, you have the ability to download, you can copy and paste, and all that gives you a free hand to the information. Is called open or general web or common web. Within the visible web, there is an other distinction made, which is still evolving, but to the extent where social media accounts gives you a privilege of keeping certain information private or public. You have that discretion, but at the same time, it is also something that you would want readers or to get to at least, or have the ability to browse enough that it leads you to a page or a website that has a portion of the information, whereas if the user has to proceed further from one page to another, as in social media, think of social media for a minute, you have the ability to um, you know bring or to allow for certain information to remain private, and the other part can be public. But private information to the extent where it is shareable or shared, so that part which includes certain videos, certain music, certain blogs, where you have some blog portals that you are using as a third party platform, but it gives you the ability to put or allow for other users to look at it in a public view or in a private or within a group. That is something that you give permission to. So that part which is partially navigatable by the users, and partially where it can hide certain information or allow for the search engine to actually cache in some of the pages where other pages are held back with the provision of a permission that you give as a user. So this part and the one on top is all visible web. Anything that is below the red line, sites that are described here are all part of the deep web. Some of the websites that can be partially classified into a dark web, or it can actually find its way into a dark web, and other sites which are not legal, but they are still floating around. They are not accessible by specific browsers like in true dark webs or darknet situation, but rather they have certain groups which are um, allowing for you to download information by registering, like 4chan. There is torrents. You've heard of torrents, ripped movies, which means that it's all illegal. Okay, so those are also somewhat considered part of the dark web, because even though they are accessible by regular or main browsers, or any browsers can access it, except that it is not totally legit. Okay. We also call this a Burgess web or Berger's web. I don't know the reason why the term is there, but let's assume that it's the kind of wording that's been around for a while, that people have started to recognize it as a portion of the deep web. Going below this, you could see that sites like subscription sites, memberships, certain records that are not public knowledge or they're not publicly available but require special permission, like medical records. There are research papers which is subscription based a lot of times, special privilege accesses to academic databases and so on. So all that is part of the deep web, and specialized directly, particularly for research reasons. When you have to access them, you need to register or subscribe to them, because you see the collection of information which is organized and it is archived or somewhat searchable, with having to put in a lot of effort to organize all of those information pages, that justifies for someone to be charging you for it, for accessing that information. So that subscription which has an organized database or a database which is privileged may be subscribed to through payment or through memberships or whatever it may be, as long as these are the pages that the search engine knows that it cannot access in the public domain and cannot index those pages. Indexing obviously means that at the time when the search engine is collecting or caching the pages and doing its own indexing, it would ignore certain pages by design, because that data is privileged, and therefore the search engine looks at those pages, and it's told not to capture it or not to go beyond this link or the hyperlink, which tells the search that if you go beyond the HTTPS would not allow you to access the secure portion of the URL that you are on. So the search engine would just drop it. So you won't get access to it. However, there are possibilities that the search would at least capture enough of those pages, or up to the page where the last page before it gives any link or any sub navigation for the user to get to the secured page. The search engine would know that this is the last page before the restriction starts. So it would lead you up to that page. And a lot of times it is necessary for the ones or the companies that are basically trying to sell that subscription, that they would ensure that enough pages or enough of those website advertisements are leading you to that specific page which requires for you to register or access through payments or on-demand payments. So as long as you know that you are able to get to those pages, or you have the ability to get there either through organically produced results or through advertisements, the idea here is to, especially in this area, is for you to recognize that a lot of information, which could be realistically about more than 60%, I would say, based on my experience, is in the hidden web. And this is probably what they're talking about. But to claim that it is not accessible is untrue, or it is not accurately described, when the deep web is mentioned. So we are able to get to these pages in the deep web, which makes it a high volume of the accessibility, up to the point where you are aware of whether or not such information pages exists, or information data or directories exist, so that you are not missing the fact that you are able to browse enough to know where it exists or where it is at. So this is the deep web area, one of the areas. Next is VPNs. Okay, the VPNs are point to point, which means that certain sensitive information or certain privileged information which allows you to enter into a domain which is holding the databases that is specific for a purpose, or is given access to through memberships, like in libraries or certain organizations or international organizations, or research papers that they collect or the surveys that they do. Um, a lot of it could be found in the UN, United Nations programs, which are non-profit organizations as well. So if you are able to get into their databases through some privileged access and other access that requires for you to fill in some basic information to somehow get the access. So that VPN is a point-to-point connection, which means even though you are using internet as a connectivity or a communication tool, but the circuit that it forms, or the connectivity it has, is encrypted, or it is secure enough that it gives a point-to-point connectivity without any interruption or any intrusion by third party. That, in other words, you can say it is a dedicated circuit or a dedicated communication link. So when we talk about link and communication in internet, you have to assume that the internet itself is like, think of it um, uh, as a means of communication only, or even wirelessly, you can think of it as waves that connect the two users to have communication between each other. Except that when we say point to point, it means that the the circuit is not going to break, which means the two IP addresses are talking to each other as if they're doing a handshake without anybody interrupting, or without you know without having to depend on internet um, mm, for for anything other than just communication. Whereas the transfer of packets, or the transmission and receiving of information, is dedicated, that it guarantees bandwidth and encryption, so that it has nothing to do with internet, as if there could be there could be a leakage of information, or the information can actually go from other IP addresses and bounce in different directions before reaching the other user. So that is another way of describing how point to point or VPN is connected. And VPN to VPN connection requires two servers or two machines, which means that if you are a user connecting to another server sitting somewhere in an organization or somewhere outside of your um, um, country where you're browsing from, it's across the border, that server which is sitting, let's say, in Germany, is going to connect you with it as if it has established a point-to-point circuit. And at the same time, the server itself would open up a gateway that is more like opening a door into, or it's a window into that country, which simulates, or which gives the IPs, or which simulates as if you as a user are browsing from Germany and not from United States. So that VPN part is also hidden. Like as I mentioned to you, the internet is not going to interfere or have anything to do with that VPN connectivity, and therefore indexing of pages is out of question. It is just used as a means of communication and not means of collecting and the content pages. So that sort of is part of the deep web also. Even deep web includes intranets. Intranets are more secure, and they're somewhat like VPNs, except that intranet, where point-to-point connectivity both is authenticated. In VPN, one connectivity from user side is not as much authenticated as is in the intranets. Intranet is a dedicated server where certain users are given privilege to tap into that communication link by through specialized permission, and it is a lot more secure than the VPN. So here, intranets are examples are like bank-to-bank communication, business-to-business communication, and so on. Then we've got in the deep web area things like yeah, I mean, it is more like a question where people ask if using anonymous web, I don't know what. Okay, so let's take an example of DuckDuckGo, for instance. DuckDuckGo tells the search. I mean, it does not, it would not actually collect information about you as a user. It would not be holding history of your searches, and it wouldn't require a lot of fine tuning or adjustments for privacy in the browser because it is already inbuilt. So when we use DuckDuckGo, the DuckDuckGo does not care which website you are visiting or wherever you're browsing. It is basically giving an anonymity, or it is not revealing your identity with the with your name or your short-term or long-term searches, but it is, at least it is recording the IP address and your location, so you're not totally anonymous in that sense. But as far as the information is concerned, it is not going to reveal a lot of information which the main browsers like Google does. So DuckDuckGo is also responsible for creating certain searches to certain sites which are not considered, which can be in the deep web area. However, the deep web itself is not concealed, or it is not like totally hidden from hiding the IP addresses or location of who is browsing, or where somebody is browsing from. So if somebody wants to track back and know from a certain location if you are the person browsing from a certain address, they would be able to map it and physically know the area or location of where you are doing your searches from. But if you talk about the dark net, there is a slight difference where certain browsers like TOR, it's called Tor, or there are other browsers also that you can download, which keeps the location or the IP address of a user totally anonymous. And at the same time, it would not reveal the identity of the vendor or whoever website you're visiting. So the specialized servers that actually entertain such communications, or those browsers that are not identifiable particularly by the general internet, um, from the domain perspective, those servers are responsible for exchanging that information, where the user wouldn't know the location or identity uh, of the owner of that website, and the website owner wouldn't know the identity of the user. So that's where that's how those servers are programmed, and they work parallel with the regular system of internets. When we talk about darknet, the system is running parallel in the same domain of internet, where internet is only the communicator, and the servers which are supposed to be having some identification in the network to be recognized as the dispenser of information and receiver of information, they remain hidden. But in the real internet world, each server that is on the internet needs to have an IP or have some location identity. So this is where this system is running parallel, and this is called dark web. And the dark web is accessible not through browsers like DuckDuckGo, but Tor is one of the browsers that you can use. There are other browsers like AHMIA, Candle, but we don't do a lot of darknet. We don't encourage it, and we don't get there because it's got a lot of illegal things happening. So that's how we would define or distinguish between the surface web or the visible web and the deep web. So within the deep web, you saw what is in there. And I think all of us are capable of getting into this area, at least this part, subscription, membership, and all these that I'm pointing to, this we get to on regular basis. So it's not truly hidden from us. So this is only the distinction between the dark web and the surface web. So why adjust the browser? And I am doing my searches using another browser, which is, I mean, using Chrome, for instance, where I have it personalized for my own personal reasons or personal searches. I won't use it for my regular search for work. And for the reason that I don't want it to map or collect information that is my personal information. So for research reasons, I have to do some adjustments and open up another account with Chrome. And I do some privacy adjustments. In there, I do anonymity adjustments if it is available. In some browsers, it's not. Security, I do that. Global reach, localization, or you want to just give it directions that you are doing your browsing from .com in US versus somewhere in Canada. Um, language you can change, uncover non-index. So what's going to happen with adjustment of web browsers is that it is going to sort of eliminate a kind of a bias that we talked about before, which is implied bias by the search. And a lot of times I would have to clean it, clear it up, change my adjustments depending on the type of search I'm doing. At times I use different browsers for different searches. So it is more of an area that that requires for you to read through what is available for privacy reasons in Google versus in in Bing versus whatever else you're using. So the idea here is for you to get to know that you may want to adjust your browser for doing your research work. That's about as much as we want to discuss because of the time. And and it keeps changing also. Like recently Google made a lot of changes in the privacy adjustments. They added few things in doing global reach or global searches. So all of that is sort of set in the details and notes. When you get to it, you have to go to your own account and look it up and do your own adjustment. There's a lot in there that we may want to be mindful of. We have done the what we call the filter, internet filter bubble, where two people are doing same searches, simulating the same browser, and just being in two parts of the world. For instance, Alex and Corey, if they're both doing the search using exact same query, using exact same browser, they would be getting different results. So so the adjustment of these browsers might help, but in the case where we are talking about internet bubble, it is an implied context or an implied logic that the search would apply. I wouldn't get the same results. Then okay, this is just telling you that there are, I mean, this figure has changed now because algorithms keep changing. It is talking about the signals that the bubble would implement or would encompass within, so that it would be necessary for you to keep in touch with what could be the different reasons or what could be the different elements attached that would have an impact on bringing you two different sets of information. So it says that there is 57 user behavior signals working in Google Chrome. Now there are 117. There are 218 browser extensions on the Chrome Web Store out of the 43,000 that they checked, which are spying on their cumulative 3 million users. So this is just fascinating for your information. It's not even in the book. The slide is here. but you can guess like how much of the information is collected by the search engine and how many different signals. Signal means that it has created a sort of a logic or a behavioral impact on return results based on what is collected by the search engine from trends, user behavior, and machine learning and so on. So those signals together, they just keep adding up. Others are interfering, or they're not doing, they're not justifying the accuracy of results. So they keep dropping that and keep experimenting with it. It's an area where we don't want to get to, because we don't have any book that says what Google is doing. The study also found that about 188 of the 218 extensions store information on the client side using unlimited storage and cookies. So what happens with the browser is that it is collecting information. You could say it's collecting 4,000 signals. It doesn't matter to us as a user. What really matters is what gets returned, and to understand how we can neutralize the behavior of search engine to the extent or as much as we can, to prevent the search engine from using its own logics or its own wisdom. Okay, so that's the whole idea. That is probably what we are trying to achieve as users by using those restrictors and operators. But anyways, the cookies are the more significant nuisance, which I would tell you for now, at least, that I mean, I don't want to go too much into the details, but you should be cleaning up and clearing your cookies as frequently as you can. And reason being that it has a lot of, sucks up a lot of resources from your own machine, and it sends a lot of signals and gives information which you thought wouldn't be accessible, but it gets transmitted, every millisecond or every second, burdening your hardware resources, and at the same time utilizing your bandwidth, and giving away a certain behavioral information that is allowable under the law. And we don't read the law and all those legit, or or the type of info which the legal system is allowing or disallowing. So we don't want to chase after that. So idea is really to get rid of the cookies as much as you can. Unlimited storage is not possible. So what happens is the browser has something programmed in the background that is called arrays. Arrays has the capacity to provide a temporary host or temporary data tables, which is not unlimited. I mean, the script cannot grow beyond certain volume of information. So sometimes, depending on how much of information is held in those arrays of those browsers, which is a local program sitting on your machine, the search may term certain volume or certain information based on time, as if it has occupied the full space or it has still more space left. So it would have accumulated long-term history for 3 months or 1 month or even just 3 weeks and call it a long-term history. It just depends on the capacity and how much of a browsing you do. So short-term is obviously single session, which is very recent. Long-term is what is affected or what could be considered as long-term based on the capacity of what is held in the arrays of that browser coding on the background.
Naveed, I have a question, if I may.
Yes.
Yes. So regarding clearing cookies, if you clear all your cookies on every browser that you use, will you also lose your login credentials on those browsers that, on those websites that you go to regularly?
Well, basically, there is another algorithm which is working in parallel to this one, to where the cookies are managed. and that holds your history of your passwords, and it's called auto form filling info. That's what you're talking about. So that doesn't get lost, and at the same time, you, for your own convenience, you may want to leave certain cookies, like from Google, for instance, or but it's not going to lose your password. You're not going to lose your login information. That's what I'm saying. So,
Okay.
if you want to hold, if you don't allow Google cookies to be set, then what will happen is that the next time you go there, it's going to automatically get downloaded. So you got to block it totally, but you're not going to block, you're not blocking it, you are cleaning it and clearing it up. Others that are there which you don't need, you may want to specifically block it, because the next time when you go to that site, it is again going to download it and just keeps continuing. So what I do is that I leave the cookie for, Google, for instance. And by the way, Google has 10 different cookies. So you have to know, if it is an advertisement cookie, you may want to delete it. If it is a cookie that is to do with your emailing and certain utilities that you use, you may want to delete that too. But it will not impact your login password, and that information that is kept in auto form filler, which is separate actually. And for that, if you want to really find out, you can go into privacy settings, and there you would see that it would ask you if you want to get rid of your autofill information. There you can actually delete that part. But in the cookies are just temporary programs which are there to inform whoever website you have visited, to inform them about your activities.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Then we've got certain challenges of the internet, which is, all these listed here. There are like 27 of them, but these are important to know, because this way you understand that if you have to filter out certain information and to actually keep an eye on or be mindful of certain type of misinformation, you would want to consider things like, for instance, some people upload things because there is raves and rents. There is some false reviews because there is a lot of ghost writers and ghost users that create multiple accounts for marketing reasons, or for creating a murmur in the social media, or just bringing up that activity level in the forums and things like that. So that is all orchestrated and pretty much so you have to be mindful of those, especially when it comes to reviews. People do want for their websites to become popular, and for that reason they need a lot of information to be or a lot of people using it. So they simulate this by outsourcing it to the marketers. So to know if it is a true review or a false review, things like that. I don't know. See, we have to pick and choose. Like, I'm just thinking of what could be some of these that you may not be familiar with, or may want to just know if there is a bias involved, like religious beliefs, for instance, political material, propaganda groups. There is a lot of material and information that is actually using these headings. It has more explanation on each one of these. And most important, in my opinion, is for us to at least read it once to understand, or keep in mind that anytime we're collecting information, we can look at it from different perspective, different angles. Just, just be more proactively careful. Um,
Can you briefly discuss number 26?
Data generalizability with internet research. See, generalizability is that when you are doing, you pick up certain notions or certain vibes or certain ideas from reading a content that you have read once and you have not cross-checked. You have checked it, but you know that that source of information may not be as reliable. However, the generalizability in where somebody else has picked up the same content and rephrased few things and kept using, like a lot of information which is set once on one of these, let's say, blogs or articles, and you know that this information is not correct. However, somebody else has picked up on the same topic, on the same context, and multiplied the error, or duplicated something which was not true. So they have generalized the information set, and they have started to think of it as a true information, and then somebody else picks it up, like a lot of operators that are no longer used by Google. Somebody has put it there, especially parentheses. People are still writing articles because it has a lot of value for it, for marketing reasons, because it's searched a lot. So when they are talking about advanced search operators, they keep mentioning parentheses as if it is still used. They use NOT when it is not used anymore. But because this data is duplicated and it is generalized as if it is a normal thing, and because of its repeated use and I guess appearing more and more, it sort of it makes users think as if it is true, or it is, because it is coming from, now it is coming from 10 different sources, it has to be true, when it is not. So that's when you don't want to generalize something. You want to be very you know you need to verify it. You need to make sure that it is correct. So you don't generalize information. You be very, very careful and specific on what you're talking about, right? What else?
What about 22? I'm just not clear on self-entitlement of opinions. Does that mean people just ranting on whatever? It's sort of not exactly raves and rants, but does it mean that people are writing opinion pieces about,
Yeah,
any specific
they
topic?
feel, yeah, I mean, self entitlement is that they're not very much savvy about a topic. They haven't read, they haven't done their research, and they are just producing something or just bringing something up because it is free grounds and nobody can stop you. Nothing is vetted, nothing is checked. So you can basically, that's one aspect. Second is your own personalized opinions. Like, you can have an opinion on something, especially sensitive issues like abortion, for instance, right? So you are, you feel that you can basically write about it without understanding the social impact, or without understanding the other side. Sensitivities might be something that should be considered. Ethics might play a large role in putting something on the net, because it is viewable, it is for anybody to look at. It also means that anyone who comes across that article or piece of writing may want to may adopt it, may think of it as being true, or sensationalizing something which is socially not acceptable in certain groups. I mean, it could be offensive, it could be personal. So one of those things. So anything that is going against the ethical norms, something which sort of may have a negative impact on the society, something that generally you wouldn't write, because if it was written, printed, you would have your name and your stamp on it. So it can be tracked. But if you are putting anything on the internet, it doesn't have to be identified with you specifically. So there is these different questions that gives entitlement of opinions, which means unvetted free information that may be, you know, may have all these different aspects that one has to look at. So a responsible writing is not something that is controlled or is, you know, or can be identified with an individual. So they feel that they have the entitlement to put anything up there, you know.
One of the things that I've personally seen, and I'm sure many of the people who are in this class have seen as well, is an increase in the number of AI generated text. So it's basically, you know, and it's getting better. I mean, when it first started, it was clear that it was written by, you know, a bot, and the cadence of the text, it wasn't proper. You just knew something was off almost right away. But now it's gotten quite sophisticated. And sometimes it takes a while to realize that this is something still off on this. It might take you, you know, several paragraphs to just realize something is off.
You're right, Paul. It is happening in two areas. Of course, AI is got a lot of different ways of how the ethics or ethical issues are mentioned or are covered with what is considered ethical with the AI making decisions or, you know, altering things and doing human-like performances. One of the things is the deep fakes that is coming up quite frequently and with a lot of accuracy. It's hard to determine unless you do a digital forensics. Same way in writing, where plagiarism is or copyright issues are somewhat compromised when you cannot put your finger exactly if it is copied word to word or it is a result of the AI that is manipulating it or redoing that. In fact, it has become an industry where especially those people who previously at low cost points were offering writing services and it wasn't really worth the money they were getting paid. Eventually, they started producing some really nice articles, or you could say at least their language was improved, you know, quite a bit. And to my surprise, I found out that it's only because they're using AI these days, you know. So everything is getting recycled. There is more and more requirement for the content to be filled in, especially in the digital world. Before, you know, while you're coming from the from journalism, and you understand that there is a vetting process of, you know, once you've got the information, you know, you've got written something, then it needs to be verified, it needs to be corrected, it needs to be edited, needs to be proofread, and, you know, all those process used to be in between. But and then there was a matter of reputation of the publisher. That was something that was also put into consideration. But now, if you look at the digital magazines, every day you see 10 different digital magazines showing up. Individuals are doing a lot of writing, and a lot of third-party individuals are contributing who are just not really writers, but they are content producers. So they have to fill in a lot of content. There is a lot of writings required these days. And if you ask me, more than 50%, I would say generally, like looking at the article, I can tell if it is AI produced or if it is original or if it is something that is actually making sense, you know. So I'd say that for those people who are really the you know, the kind of readers who are educated enough, who are professionals, who understands, or you could say that who are well informed readers, they could make the difference. But the common readers, and especially production of short articles, which could be 2 or 3 paragraphs, but have sensationalized certain, you know, things, or put some photos, a mix of that, or some multimedia, some story. So the package that they're building is now more attractive to teenagers, or, depends on the group of people that they're focusing on. So if it is something serious or something that I want to, think of it as not for entertainment reasons, but for learning purposes or for actual information that I could rely on, I would vet that. I would just make sure that it is not AI produced. So definitely, if it is AIs, honestly, I would be able to tell. I would never go back to that, to that publisher or whoever is running that website. And that just throws me, it just makes me think that it is actually causing me, it is going to really create a huge problem if I keep following that or keep reading that. So I wouldn't read it. But others, there is a large population that are only interested in entertainment or something that is sensationalizing something, and that's fine for them. Maybe they deserve it.
It's a complicated topic, but it's one that really is important because as the information overload increases for all of us, so many people are in scan mode. So if you're in scan mode and you're just scanning everything, so you could be scanning everything from the New Yorker to the Atlantic and then flying through something else on your feed quickly. And if you read it and you're not really paying attention to what it's saying, or it's not really like grabbing you right away that it might be AI,
Yes.
it creates an impression, that may in fact be wrong. It could be, information that's absolutely made up or just inaccurate. But because people are in scanning mode, they're just not as focused as they normally would be.
So it depends. In the end, it depends on the reader. Really, is the only awareness which is
Agree.
important. And for, the kind of people or the class of people that are only interested in certain topics, which for two of us, assuming for you and me, may not be as interesting or as, because we are not looking for quick information. What we are talking about with AI is something, could be a complex topic, or it could be a piece of information or an article that is, being manipulated or recycled. So if the information is such that it attracts those people that actually, be reading it or getting misinformed on regular basis, then hardly anybody can stop it, because that's an area that probably just requires awareness. And who would go against, you know um, you know although that is all those, volume of content that is produced, to bring it to the attention of common users to understand that these are not correct, or these are false, or, we cannot even label or pinpoint somebody saying, then we've got a defamation issue, and we've got other things that we have to fight against. So awareness is something that has to be very personalized for individuals to understand, given the seriousness of that information, and what that information is about. In our profession, like if we are doing some serious research work, and which is where we get paid for it, obviously, is research means that we are trying to find facts. And so when we get into that zone and we are using internet as a main information resource, we are extraordinarily careful. So even reading through blogs or articles, I'll have to, so my objective obviously is to just get rid of the irrelevant, find the relevant, and then start to verify the sources and everything. So yes, nothing we can do, unfortunately. AI is going to improve further. AI, somebody wrote, like, giving you an example, I wrote one book, a small booklet. It got translated into 2-3 languages. It started to get distributed. I didn't even know if it was my content eventually. And because they use AI to, just even some of the, there is some writings that you cannot apply the AIs for. And they were able to even do that. And I couldn't believe it. So I'm also getting tired of this chasing after, people who are doing this. Some articles I wrote and now they're circulated everywhere, but it looks like it's mine, but I can't really tell if it is actually mine or not. So that that part is going on, unfortunately. But people, I'll tell you, people who know the work, who understand the subject, who are serious about what they read, they would figure it out eventually, and they would drop that source of information totally from their they would never go back to that. I wouldn't. I would like to start with sources of information, of the type of information that we'd like to define. And there is actually a primary source, which is most premium information or first-hand information, we call it. And that information has a lot to do with how you obtain it. Besides just having found it, the origin of that document, if it is original, that is primary. And in the sense of how it is actually collected on the internet, or something we call primary, are things like surveys that we do, the focus group that we form, and we get our information from there. We get polls, we have social experiments. Those are all first-hand information or primary information. It's collected directly, and the source of information, and you have actually way of proving the source as being, depending if it's a human subject or if it is a resource that is understood to be a research work. That could be the origin, or the originality of it can be defined from the source itself. So primary source, in just getting an idea of what it includes, are things like letters, interviews, personalized documents, artifacts, diary that you maintain, or someone else's diary that you have collected, that's original writings. So all this is actually first-hand primary, or the information that is more premium and is considered more valuable. Okay, but in real world, lots of times we don't get access to primary information, and more of what we rely on is a secondary information. And the secondary information is through books, government publications, reports, all sorts of reports, could be research reports, or just reports that is generated by the by through analytics or trend analysis or things of that nature. Newspaper articles are not considered primary. A lot of times you think of it as primary information, or the source that can be relied upon, but it is actually a secondary information. You need further verification of these articles, stories, and so on. Academic papers are also secondary, unless the citations or cross references to what is written in academic papers is proven to be, or is coming from the information set that is primary information. So within academic paper, there could be a bit of primary sources and others can be secondary. Magazines, journals, blogs, etc. These are all secondary information sources. Tertiary information sources, third-party databases that we use or we rely on, or we consider for subscription reasons, or buying research reports from the research companies. So when we get things like that, we certainly would think of it as already, or assumed to be already collected through some verification process. But those are tertiary information sources and not even secondary sources. Forms, need, and dependency factors. Okay. So when you have to do your research, you have to obviously plan it. And while you're planning it, you have to keep in view certain factors like how much detail do you need. So, there are different types of information or different projects with the given sets of problems for research, or they could be, fact finding research reports. The objective will vary. So you have to understand the details of it, or to what depth you have to go and collect that information. Would it involve surveys directly, or would it involve just collecting information from magazines or books or whatever source? But details or the depth of it is to be assessed. And we are talking about the information dependency based on these factors, which is inversely or directly dependent on the scope of your research. Basic background information, a quick fact, or in-depth coverage. These are different types that we will look at next in the next slide. Are you searching for scholarly or popular publications? Do you need primary or secondary sources of both? And the last one is more important, whether your research involves qualitative analysis or quantitative analysis. So qualitative or quantitative is what needs to be described as the main approaches on how the analytics are to be done for the information you collect. Because after all, when you collect the information, it needs to be analyzed in different ways to build some sort of um, some sort of value for the reader to be able to interpret that through how you have organized it and what type of analytics are performed, so that the objective of your research can be achieved. And this would require either qualitative approach or quantitative approach. And we'll discuss it also. So information that is talking about basic background, or how much detail you need. So first and the second point is actually dependent on the type of information. So there could be a background information that is required, normally between 1 through 10. The type of information or the sources of information that you are collecting from will are going to be applied in a mixed way within a research report. So a part of it could be a background information. It depends on the type of research and the research reports that you're building and the scope of your research. So a part of it could be a background information which could be necessary. In-depth background information is just giving an overview or a review of where it's coming from, or what is the objective, what is the background of your research, and so on. So that is where the background information needs to be this at the start of your research report. Then in-depth information obviously requires for you to do research in either ensuring that the information is factual and something that relates to another, or it is more on the exploratory side, where you're discovering more information that gets built on top of the basic information you have. So that is what is going to make an in-depth information. Quick facts review. So you have to cross-check facts, especially if it is tables and graphs and figures, and you've got a lot of data. So you need to ensure that some of it you are able to verify. A lot of times you have to use sampling techniques to ensure that certain facts can be verified if it's a voluminous data. So the sample out of a population is what you will verify. In 4, it says real-time information. Time sensitive information that is moving fast, which is to be captured at the time when something happens. And we create what we call information traps, and that can be done. And we're, when it comes to traditional research, we are talking about both manual methods and internet based methods, as well as querying certain online databases. So when real-time information is involved, we are talking about something which is evolving as a story, something that is moving with time, or the figures are changing, or the information has a sensitivity based on the delivery of that information. So the actionable decision can be made. So you do create traps and you call them real-time information. Information discovery is more to do with doing some background check, verifying certain information, chasing after certain things to see where they're at, or locating evidences. It's more on the investigative side. So information discovery, assets discovery is one of them. Knowledge discovery is something that you build based on the historic data or recent events, or something that would allow you to create charts that gives projections for the future, or something that allows you to build or change existing information when something is changing with time, and you're discovering more and more, and sort of making those adjustments to your data, to your databases. Big data are unstructured data that is floating around on the internet, that may be a lot of volume of information, except that it is not structured enough that you can correlate that unless you organize it into tables. And because of the volume of it, there's so many different techniques that you can apply to at least get a more of a generalized opinion, or you can get information like uh, you know um, on the larger scale of how you would make prediction based on numbers that are shifting with time, or a month of the year, or is changing with technology, with how people are reacting to certain issues, or certain new products, that is, or discovery of a new technology. But you want to gather opinions, you want to see the behavior of so many people on some issue that is a large issue, and therefore you can use or call that a big data that can work with, or you can play with, only if you have access to it. Mostly it's large machines that are produced by IBM, which is now managing big data or doing some sort of calculations with the big data is millions and billions of records. So that is really a big data, which is unstructured, or we call raw data also. But what is processing it, making it more manageable and organized enough that it would give it some meaning. Uh, IBM is one of those people that is working on big data information technology. Then we've got analytics or statistical data. So when we are using any data for analysis or analytics, we like to look at different sources of collecting that data. If it is a direct or primary information that you're collecting, it could be polls, it could be census, surveys, and statistical, historical information, and so on. So that is mostly numerical, and it is what, well, let me not bring that term in yet, but just to say it quickly, it's quantitative side of analytics, or the numeric values of data. Then we've got virtual groups or communities. This virtual group or communities is used for different various reasons. It could be a discussion on some issues, the sample or the collection of people, or whoever is involved as subjects has to be carefully vetted and has to have a common objective of getting some value from discussions between groups, as well as the social media that contains forums or has a platform where the exchange of information through some discussions on certain topics is picked up as a way of figuring out or analyzing the public sentiments. You could pretty much use a method called qualitative data or qualitative analytics, which means that you would be able to translate the sentiments, which cannot have a normal numeric value, but would have some sort of relationship based on the method of qualitative analysis, which says things like sentiments, if you like or you dislike between 1 to 10, or how many of people said yes, how many people said no, things of that nature. So virtual groups or communities would be another set of information that is, depending again, type of research and what you are asked to do as a researcher. Next is news, blogs, articles, reviews. If you're collecting information from sources like these, then we'd call them as secondary sources plainly. And basically between news, blogs, articles, and all of these that are in the public domain, you will have to perform a lot more verifications and therefore have to give some references in order for the user of your research to gain that confidence or knowing where you've collected from, and to verify themselves, as well as for you to give a reassurance that you have actually revealed your sources of where this information is coming from. So this is like 10 different types of resources, or we classify them as 1 through 10, and each one of these have their own specific way of collecting as well as their use in your research work. And by the way, when you are designing your research report or you're responding as a researcher with the comprehensive reports for your clients, you have to mention the type of information, the sources of information, the reliability of it, or the source where you have collected from, how, or if you have applied your reasonable methods of ensuring their reliability. And then you have to also apply certain analysis or do analytics based on the type of data that you collect from 1 through 10, because data can be anything, could be numbers, it could be value of the information itself. So you have to know if you want to apply qualitative analysis or quantitative analysis. If the data is numeric value, easy to quantify it and do quantitative analysis. If it is sentiments related, you do qualitative analysis. So reliability factor considered in the information source is the author's verifications. What I do normally is that, if I'm collecting something from articles, news, or say blogs, or somewhere in the research papers that are coming from a commercial research firm that often I subscribe to, I have to also know the author well enough to actually understand that this person is is only writing on one subject, or is coming from a professional background that entitles that person to actually write on that subject, that specific subject. A lot of times it's just one author writing about 10 different subjects or 10 different topics, which are some of them might be totally different, or may be maybe some in some sector or of industry that needs to have a specialized training or should have enough knowledge from that market. So I don't consider those authors that are writing on different subject as authentic, and I go much further to verify the source or verify that piece of content. Then you got purpose of information in review. The purpose can be that if the management is going to rely on your research for, let's say, launching a new product, and that could be a sensitive matter, you want to make sure that the purpose of this is such that any misinformation or any numbers that you've collected, if they are not accurate enough, it could impact adversely as misinformation, even though it may not be intentional, but just because you have not performed your research enough to verify them, and the nature of research is such that there is a high reliance on it, I would be more careful about the sources, and therefore try to collect it from primary resource as much as I can. Information objectivity evaluation is another process. Objectivity evaluation means that eventually if this research report is going to be used by shareholders, if it is going to be used by internally by the management or the banks, so the objective of evaluation is somewhat a mix of what we have in 1 and 2. So I don't isolate each one of these as separate because all of these are interconnected. So information objectivity evaluation is another type of assessment of where this report is going to go. Accuracy of information will obviously depend again on number 2. Reliability and credibility of information presented, different ways of verifying reliability. So there's a difference between reliability and credibility, in the sense that reliability is it will depend on the source itself. The source may be, let's say, international organization, non-profit organizations that are working on the ground, for instance, and they're producing certain reports. So I know that they could be, could be more reliable. Credibility, meaning that the source that is generating it, let's say if it is coming from educational department or some academic area, or some military resources, or if it is credible, that credibility will definitely be something that I will look at after I have done my checking with the reliance or reliability of it. Then the credibility of numbers or anything that is described inside the report as facts and figures. So that would be the credibility that also indirectly relates to whether or not the resource of those numbers are cited or given as a cross reference. So I know where it is coming from. Currency of time is important, depending if the information is fresh enough, or if the information is that is required is time sensitive, or you are not looking for something as old as 3 months ago, or it may be specified by the client that it should be the latest one, or the so currency of time may be another factor. The currency of time in terms of when it needs to be delivered is not the issue here, because we are don't want to mix that. Currency of time is where, when it is mentioned here for the reliability factor, means that if it is fresh or if it is too old. So that part is what we are discussing. We would be using the same term, unfortunately, currency of time, later on, so I don't want to mix it. That currency of time is when the reports are to be delivered within certain period of time, if those are time sensitive. So that and this one will be different. Verification of links, if it is something that is referred to as cross links, or where some information is picked from, usually on the internet you will find it quite frequently mentioned with the links as the resource. So you may want to verify where the links are taking you, or just reading through the links you would know where they're coming from. Then planning areas, research planning, scoping of the project is most important. It depends on how much of information your client is giving to you. In the first instance, when you start to engage with a client, they don't give out a lot of information. They give you a brief of what the scope would be, and it's your job really to get back to them, ask you to elaborate on something. One of the reasons they don't disclose the entire scope is because they have not signed the NDA with you, or non-disclosure agreement, or they are reluctant to give you more information than what is briefly required, just to get an idea of your price line, or how much you're going to charge, or the things of that. So whatever it might be, scope is most important. So assessing the scope or what is required of you. Information sources, that could be part of the scope of work, or could be, it's obviously related to the scope of work. So information resourcing may be sometimes very difficult to get, other times it is sometimes impossible to get to. At times you have to rely on certain research reports for which you have to pay for and obtain it, so that you can get access to quick facts or historical facts from somewhere else. So that needs to be also planned. When we say planning, planning also includes budgeting and costing, so that your cost of the project can be assessed, and based on that you can obviously quote to the client. So information sourcing is a main factor, because sometimes it is, you know, beyond your control, for which you have to really provision for. Data collection, data type, and sampling of data. So data collection can be a method that could be tedious. If it is primary information, they may ask you to conduct surveys or collect information from certain industry, for which, you know, you may not be able to get enough of data or anything that is available readily. So you have to get that assessment done, and data collection method of how you're going to collect it is important for your cost reasons. Data types, sampling of data. If it is a large population you're dealing with, then the sampling has to be confirmed with the client to understand what could be the more reliable sample unit that the client would be satisfied with. And the sample has to be determined based on the nature of your research. So if it is to do with medical science or medical trials, the process is a lot more complicated. So your sampling might be might be an issue for cost reasons, as well as your ability to get to get what they call the sampling recruitment. Sampling recruitment is a process in which is actually pretty much is regulated. Let's say if it is human subject, then you need to get informed consent from those individuals. So sampling can get very complicated. Then we've got data analysis methods and techniques. Now analysis is a part which both the client may decide to do or ask you to just collect information, but more than likely they would require for you to do analytics also. Analytics will depend on, analytics is nothing but analyzing relationship between data which you create by organizing what you have collected, either through qualitative data procurement or the quantitative type. And the analysis techniques for qualitative and quantitative type of data are different, and each one of them may involve some sort of expertise. And to the extent that we use analytics, we apply software, we use specialized softwares to create graphs and to do data visualization. And certain data types which are voluminous, we do a kind of techniques, again using the software which does statistical analysis, like dispersion analysis, for instance. So it's all related to the type of analytics that you're going to perform. Then we've got information reliability, quality, and risk. So information reliability, quality, and risk will depend on what is agreed between you and the client about, first of all, the objective of the research, and in what ways it's going to be used. And based on its use, they would tell you to what extent they need the reliability of the data, as well as understand that certain data units cannot be as accurate and has to be assumed or analyzed based on historic values, so that future projections can be considered for analytics. And for that reason, there was an element of risks or futures that involve another type of analytics that gives a value of somewhat a deviation or the risk deviation from what should be considered as the bottom line reliable or reliability factor. So when we are doing information reliability, quality, and risk analysis, we are certainly depending on the scope of project and depending on how that report needs to be used. In the sixth or the last one where planning is required is research, results, interpretation, and reporting. So unless you are an expert in the industry and you've been doing research in that specific area, you probably won't be required to give any conclusions or make any interpretation. Simply what is considered more valuable is for you to at least present your information sets in a way that it appears as more understandable by the management, who may not be as technical, but at least have a sense of knowing what they see within graphs, within data visualization, within the analytics that you have done, so that they can make their own interpretation and come to their own conclusions rather than give it to you to come up with those. If you are doing interpretation and making conclusions as well, then you are treated more like a consultant or an expert who is basically giving out their own opinions on a situation, after presenting a research on a problem or an issue. So 1 through 6 is the planning area. And then of course, when you're doing your planning for research, you obviously have other aspects that you are going to look at. You're going to look at the the contract. You have to build that specialized contract. You have to give pricing. You should be able to give more details on the type of analytics you are doing. So generally this is the headlines or the headings of the research plan, but not the the details of what comes under these headings. And those are the things that as we go along with the next few slides, we'll get a better understanding of what it entails in detail. So research planning, research work assessment and approach. Okay, it is so much on the descriptive side, and it is probably not as exciting or nothing that we can put in the search box. So might get a little bit boring for you, but it's going to be in the exams, and we like to cover the traditional research method, and that's where we are going to take this. Excuse me. So these are different steps for research work assessment. We'll be looking at these anyways. You can read through it, not for me to identify or to give details for. Scoping, we will learn in detail. Research topic, defining a research topic. Of course, I mean, you can pretty much understand what it would mean, but more details are in the book. I don't want to get into these because, defining a research topic, again, it's going to be more on the definition side, what the topic should cover, how much of the topic or what type of how the topics are to be written for the research, because there are certain type of research, like topics could be things like market research, share valuation research, industry research, so all those are going to be the broad headings of the type of research. So I'm not going to get into that because we have quite a bit of information in the book. Identify research problem, primary audience. I'm going to skip this one. Scoping research. So there is a broad scope and there is a narrow scope. Broad scope simply means that not much is given in the scope, where the client is giving you a document called request for quotations on research projects. So it's RFQ you will get. In RFQ, initially, I'll tell you that it's going to be two types of research. One could be broad research. That means they are trying to explore more, find more information. So the research would have a topic that requires a lot of research and basically collection of a lot of data, so that they have more to work with as a client to find for you to find more information on a topic that is not specified, which is not narrowed down enough. So that is broad scope. And then you got Narrow defined is more focused. It is more, specific. Questions are more clearer. And, generally, this is a narrowly defined research scope is much better than a broad research. But you can basically think of broadly defined research topic as an ongoing research. Normally, that's where it takes you. And you don't know exactly the time frame when it's going to finish. So you have something like a contract called cost plus contract, which means that you only charge the client for the number of hours, and the client would ask you to find more angles, more look at problem with look at the research problem with different perspectives, and so it just evolves and it just keeps going. Narrowly defined is usually got a time frame, and at times it is you're pressed for time to deliver something precisely, and that is not narrowly defined. Next is data collection and sampling methods. So data, this is just definitions. What is data in research? What are data collection methods? What is the data value for research purposes? So data in research is anything that could be descriptive or that could be quantitative or numeric. Everything is called data. When data is processed, organized, interpreted, or presented in a structured format to give it a context or meaning, it is called information. Obviously, I mean, this is ABC of what information is. Information is collection of data, collection of information that correlates enough to give it a meaning which can be understood and be considered for making business decisions. So what is data in research? That's what it is. What are data collection methods? It could be methods of how you're going to approach the subject or the source of collecting your information, and there could be different methods of doing that. And we're going to look at the collection methods being surveys and focus groups, social experiments, and all that. So those will be the methods. What is the value for research purposes? Data value. Data value we have to obviously consider at all times, even if it is not specifically mentioned by the clients. Your objective would be to ensure it is reliable, it is relevant, it is accurate, it is current, it is purposeful, and objective. So these are like 6 factors that we always consider, and if any of these are missing, then we have to inform the client. So reliable, you understand, relevant to the problem, accuracy, obviously, current, freshness, purposeful, that means it should fulfill the purpose or the objective of your research. This chart is a complex one. Here we are going to talk about what are different types of data that we classify as qualitative and quantitative. And we also talk about collection methods. Over here, it's going to talk about observations as being one of the methods. And mostly whatever we are going to discuss here is part of, it can be considered in the light of how internet can be used for collecting or making these methods correspond with the traditional research method, only with the difference that they can be applied exactly the same way when we are collecting information on the internet, with few exceptions. So this is data collection methods 1 through 6 we are going to discuss. Then we will also talk about the analytics or the different analytic methods for qualitative data and quantitative data. We are not doing in-depth analytics or data analytics. That's not the intent of this topic. We just want you to be familiar with, or at least have an understanding of, what can be considered analysis or analytics, or what what is the meaning of analysis and analytics. On the other hand, we will also want to know or distinguish between the 2 important types of data sets that needs to be qualified as 2 different categories, so that each of these categories would apply or would require a methodology of collection, as well as to understand how the analytics would play a part in doing qualitative analysis versus quantitative analysis. So qualitative would have a different methodology for analytics, and qualitative will have a different methodology. That's the next topic that we will do when we meet next on Monday. I think before I start this, I would like to look at if anything else from the previous lecture is left out. If not, then we'll just conclude our session today. So I'll just browse through it quickly. If I don't see anything that I've missed, then we would just end our class. Okay, so any questions so far, Del, Marshall, Paul, anything that I can answer for you, anything specific to whatever we've discussed so far?
I'm good.
All right. Paul, is this boring for you, or do you think they will be useful? Because we got done with the queries.
No, I think this is very useful, and I think it's important to really, dig down into. I like the planning your research, because I think one of the realities of doing research sometimes is that you start digging in, and if you don't plan it, you can easily go down rabbit holes. And so I like having that very robust planning stage, because
Right.
it keeps you in sync with the client's expectations, and it also keeps you in line.
But when you're doing your writing, I don't know, do you do like research as a part of your job description?
Yes, I do a lot of research. Yep.
So then it should be very useful, because what we'll end up doing with moving with the type of data and all the analytics is that we'll see how the research reports are built. And with that, you would also see in those reports certain terminologies, certain type of structure of how you are going to build those reports, so that it is acceptable industry wide, like as a research, as a true research, just so that there could be a lot of work that you may have done or research that you want to compile or put it together as a research paper, or some topic that you want to create and build your own research report and then sell it as well. I've had built a few researches that are now part of the, it's let's put it this way, it's making good money for us, so that could be another advantage, where you can actually produce something which is saleable or can be making money. So anyway, let's just catch up with the research reports, the qualitative and quantitative data, and all the data analytics that we can finish up in the next lecture. So that would be on Monday. Until then, I wish you all a great weekend, and hope to see you on Monday. But let me, before I go, I didn't even ask Del anything yet, or even Marshall, Dominic. Dominic, any questions so far, or how was everything for you today? Was it, did you have any question at all, or you thought?
No real questions. Just
Okay.
somewhat eager to get to the next section.
Yeah, because this one is okay. So the next section will be even more boring. Is that
I know.
okay?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. That's okay.
How about you, Del? You doing all right? I didn't hear a word from you. Is your mic working today?
Well, yeah, thank you. And I hope you can hear me, because I'm
Yeah.
never sure. But actually, I got in kind of late today, so I'm going to have to review this lesson again.
Okay.
But the information looks very interesting. I can see that I have a lot, because I haven't done research and data collection in the past. So it's going to be a new experience for me, but I'm looking forward to it. I think that with the organization, if I can put all of that together, that I can make it useful at some point, but we will see.
Certainly. I'll certainly make sure that, I cover everything that you would require to build really impressive research reports in case you need to deliver it to your clients. So having said this, I'd say goodbye to you all three of you. Thank you very much for coming today.
Have a good
Take the
weekend.
class. I'll see you two on Monday. Bye-bye.